How would you feel about a law that requires people over the age of 70 to pass a specialized driving test in order to continue driving? Sorry if this ends up being long, but it's angered me for quite some time. About 10 years ago, my mother at age 69 had a massive stroke. They didn't expect her to live, let alone come out of it mostly all right. Which she did, except for some vision loss in her left eye. Not total, just peripheral, so she can only see perfectly straight out of that eye. So after about a year recovering from the stroke and the ensuing infection from the surgery that ended up being worse than the stroke itself, she decides she wants to go get tested to see if she can retain her driver's license. Required by law in my province of Canada. My father was not well either, as he had a long-term terminal illness, so I pack them both up in my truck and take them to the DMV. Me and my father happily assuming there is no fucking way in hell she will pass. Aside from her vision issues, the amazingly quick-witted and swift woman I grew up with was very unsure of herself at all times and took forever to make the smallest decisions. It broke my heart, and it didn't even occur to me to be scared that she would get her license back. Well, she did, passed with flying colors, the DMV guy said. As a SAR search and rescue tech, the idea of taking him up in the helicopter and throwing him out without a rope occurred to me. 1 week later, accident number 1. T-boned a poor lady as she was coming out of the grocery store, not much damage and no injuries thankfully. Mother still refused to admit she wasn't fit to drive. Month later, accident 2. She panics on a multi-lane cross-city road and ends up on the raised median and rips the entire exhaust system off her car. Still won't admit any issues. At this point I'm amazed I didn't have ulcers. Shortly after accident 2, my father passed away. I did everything up to and including begging to get her to give up the license. She wouldn't do it, and for the next few months I spent every day with a knot in my stomach until I spoke to her around 6 p.m. every night once she was home from running around. Then around 1 p.m. I get a call from her cell phone, this phone I bought her that she mostly ignored except to charge it. I couldn't understand a word she said, she was so upset on the phone. I managed to get her general location out of her and hopped in a car and more than exceeded the speed limit getting down there. Upon arriving there are 2 ambulances, shoes in front of her car, and it's up on the curb. She's sitting on the curb next to it bawling her eyes out, and I'm terrified she's killed someone. Turns out a man and his son were walking out of the soccer pitch next to the road, began to cross on the crosswalk, and she didn't see them. She thankfully only struck the father, and aside from being banged up he wasn't super seriously injured. Because of my job I knew most of the police officers in the city, so one of them offered to follow me back to her house so she could take me back down to get her car. By the time I had done so and got back to her condo, she had stopped crying. Threw me the extra set of keys to the car she had and told me to get rid of the car. She even tried to get the DMV worker that passed her fired after that. She immediately realized she shouldn't have ever gotten it back. She was actually terrified that she had been driving like that. Years later she still comments about how she never even saw the man and his son and how she could have killed one or both of them. I have all the respect in the world for seniors. My mother was one of the first women CEOs in this province and was a hellcat in her day. I learned a lot from her. But I also learned to accept limitations. If you are older reading this post, if you think for even a second that you could maybe not be the safest person to be on the road, talk to and listen to your loved ones. It's horrible to give up that freedom, it would be more horrible for you to kill some innocent person because you are too proud to give it up. Edit. Thanks for the gold, mysterious stranger. Here in Illinois my grandpa had to do it every year after 75. I think older drivers definitely need to be retested and have restrictions put on their license as to driving at night, driving only within certain distances of the home, driving above certain speeds, etc., up to and including revocation if found to be impaired to significant degree. And I'm staring down 70 myself. In Japan, they have special decals that identify new drivers and the elderly, which I think is a good thing. If you see someone with an elderly tag, you might not assume that driver sees everything you do or reacts as quickly as you do. I had trouble getting my dad to quit driving because I knew he couldn't see. He couldn't tell me from my daughter from across the room. I called the DMV for suggestions and sent him a letter to come in for a vision test. He passed. He was in his 90s with cataracts and dementia. We had a lot of rancor over this issue and he ended up living with my brother whom he would actually listen to. And he quit driving. I'm an optometrist. You'd be surprised at how many patients come in and tell me they failed the DMV vision test, but the person passed them anyway. It's ridiculous. Those DMV people that pass people who fail eye tests are criminals. Why are they doing that? Jesus. I was 17 when I took the vision test for my license. The guy doing the vision test had me look into a little box, and asked me, which of these signs is farthest away? I have no vision issues of any kind, and great depth perception, but for the life of me I couldn't tell. I answered him honestly, if sarcastically, and said, I don't know, they're all about 10 inches away in a wooden box. All he said was, "Yuha," and passed me. He probably just thought I was some asshole kid, but he didn't do anything to follow up me saying, very clearly, that I couldn't tell. I work at a driver licensing office. Maybe I can help for clarity. When it comes to depth perception, we need to give that part of the test, but you can't technically fail that part where I'm at. If your depth perception sucks, I need to tell you that objects may be closer than they appear, but we license those with vision in only one eye, which is zero depth perception. As long as you have 20/30ths vision, no diplopia, and adequate peripheral vision 120 degrees, you're likely to pass. Edit, and not severely color blind, we license those with vision in only one eye. How do these people get judged to have adequate peripheral vision when they have no peripheral vision on one side? I know you don't make the rules, but it scares me. I suppose, though, that an alert driver with one eye is probably safer than someone pointing both eyes at their phone to text. The deal about licensing one-eyed people and needing peripheral vision seem contradictory. Could be something like, a person with one eye is more likely to heed advice such as, keep in mind, since you have an eye missing you do not have enough peripheral vision on your left side, so you need to get in the habit of checking that side more often. Someone with two eyes and bad peripheral vision might not be as likely to listen to similar advice. Person with one eye here, you don't need to warn of anything, checking blind spots and being critical of an object's apparent distance becomes part of life. People don't usually just lose an eye and act like they still have two. I have no vision in my left eye. This is exactly what I do. Really not that difficult. My vision has never once gotten me into an accident. I don't know why people are so appalled people with vision in one eye can drive. That's a great idea. I'm going to call my 8-year-old congressman and ask him to support such legislation. Edit, most driving laws are passed by state legislators, who usually do drive themselves. And if they ever need to get a vote on such an issue, it's not like seniors are the best at getting themselves to the polls. Oh. You just made it all make sense. Younger voters are afraid to drive to the polls, lest they be hit by old farts in big cars careening down the road to cast their ballot. Maybe some are even being killed before reaching the polls, too, reducing the number of younger voters further. You want more sense? Many old people at that age are retired and have all the time in the world to follow politics and get to the polling booth. Whereas younger people are too busy with work, school, and relationships to think about that stuff, let alone participate. I'm beginning to think I could write for The Onion. A safe stay-at-home job. It'll keep you off the streets and safe from those old people who keep running over young people. You think this would make a good enough cover letter for applying? Old retired guy here. 74 years old to be precise. I would accept such a test provided it was only to catch really age-related diseases. Dementia, poor reflexes, etc. I live in a retirement community and most of the people who should not have a license have already given them up. The first day I was here I heard a conversation between two guys. Guy 1, I just turned 88 and turned in my driver's license. Guy 2, why would you do that? Guy 1, I don't want to spend the rest of my life in jail. I live in South Florida, Boca area, and am an attorney. Many clients are in retirement communities. I always insist on driving to them. I've only live here a little over a year. I've witnessed on multiple occasions people driving motorized wheelchairs on 6-lane roads. I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' retirement community's pool. One particular shocker was overhearing a woman say she was driving around and no longer taking her anti-seizure medication. Several residents sold their cars and bought golf carts and could get around easily that way. Edit to add, my grandmother ended up bumping into several buildings and another car before deciding to sell her car. But she won't give up her license, just in case she decided to take a taxi to a dealership that would gladly sell her a car. When I had a seizure, I was told my license was suspended. Which it turned out it wasn't, since I went and got my normal license, was on a permit, soon after, no problems. In Australia, I has a seizure during surgery and had my license suspended. I had to wait 3 months and have several tests before they decided there was nothing wrong with me. It then took them another month before the paperwork was done for me to drive again. It sucked. That's kind of weird. Was the seizure not related to the surgery? I would think the doctor would say, "Oh yeah, you just had a psychogenic seizure from the anesthesia. You're not actually epileptic, so I'm not going to suspend your license." Same in Canada, doctors in some provinces must report any condition that could mean you should not drive. Seizures? Well, until they are sure it's not a recurring thing, better safe than sorry. After all, the doctor still gets to drive even if you don't. But if he doesn't report, he could lose his more valuable medical license. Anything that results in blackouts, automatic suspension. Same in Canada, doctors in some provinces must report any condition that could mean you should not drive. That makes entirely too much sense. My father is an optometrist in New Jersey. He is prohibited from reporting to the state people who have medical conditions that disqualify them from driving. I send patients for driver's evaluations if their ability to navigate through my office is concerningly questionable. Unaware drivers are just as dangerous as impaired drivers. I work with the olds for a living. The frequency that they casually drop, "My doctor told me I can't drive anymore," coupled with the fact that they drove to my office, is terrifying. One woman could barely walk, who also told me she couldn't see while I was demonstrating something to her, got in her car and drove away after her appointment. There's another man who constantly tells us he donated his car to someone who needed it but regrets it because he has to take the bus everywhere. The son told us they literally had to take it away because he kept driving on sidewalks and running lights, and he refused to stop driving after his license was suspended for drunk driving. I watched another woman just YOLO pull away from the curb as she was leaving, nearly causing a multi-car pile-up. One woman came in because she had head trauma from an accident she caused. She drove herself. Oh, I've also had my bumper smashed in by a patient just trying to park in the spot next to me. I get a full dose of their cognitive skills in my office. There are many times I'm pleasantly surprised at how sharp they still are, but more often than not I'm afraid for those who are sharing the road with them on their way home. While I agree they do deserve the dignity of having the same rights as everyone else, I do not believe that right should supersede the safety of literally anyone else on the road with them. Of course they should have the same rights as everyone else. Driving, however, is not a right. Driving is a privilege at any age. Please. My grandma is practically blind and went to take her driving vision test to renew her license. She failed, but the lady at the DMV felt bad, so she had her take it again and gave her hints so she could pass it. So now my practically blind grandma is out on the road still. It's for their safety as much as anyone else's. I'm so mad that the lady at the DMV was so irresponsible as to let her keep driving. I know of someone, north of 80 years old, who had horrible cataracts, had refused to visit an optometrist for years, and was not fit to drive. They avoided eye examinations because they knew they would have their license taken. When they finally went to get a cataract surgery scheduled, their doctor told them that if they agreed not to drive until after the surgery and after their eyes healed, they would not have their license taken. Legally, they can drive. And plan to. But holy fuck, they should not be anywhere near a road. I'm all for retesting, because it would catch shit like that. What's equally important is that elderly people who depend upon driving in order to attend appointments, social events, and grocery shop but are no longer fit to drive should be given suitable recourse. Many elderly folks live independently from their families for reasons dictated by newer social norms and post-industrial economy. Multi-generational households are less of the norm than in past decades because younger people must relocate to where the jobs are. Furthermore, North America is expansive in geography. Many people don't live in very densely populated cities where they can walk, use a taxi, Uber, or use public transportation. They are almost obliged to drive. I'm all for legally taking away the keys of incompetent drivers. We did it to my grandmother who grieved over it deeply. But, we must also implement adequate social programs so that revoking a license isn't a social death as well. Edit, you, Motonutter, thank you for the gold. This frustrates me so much. My grandmother had her license taken away because her motor skills have deteriorated a lot, particularly her legs after hip replacement surgery, and I agree with her license being taken away. Her driving was scary. But now she only has one person from the state come by once a fortnight to take her out. If my family can't make it 1 week, she's stuck at home for 2 weeks. It's disgusting. A lot of states have elderly bus and non-medical ambulances to take the elderly and disabled to appointments around town, and unlike a regular bus, they'll go door to door. My grandpa uses the program and uses it to stay independent. Unfortunately, where my grandma lives, outer suburbs of Brisbane, there isn't a service like this, as far as I know.